Welcome to the channel The Coins Explorer. And today I'm about to reveal something that could change your life forever, because what if I told you that a coin from 1945, a simple 1-cent wheat penny that might be hiding in your grandmother's old coin jar or tucked away in a dusty drawer somewhere in your attic, could be worth an absolutely mind-blowing $526 million. Yes, you heard that right. $526 million. This isn't science fiction, this isn't a fairy tale, this is real, and this is happening right now in the world of rare coin collecting. The 1945 wheat penny, a coin that millions of Americans once used to buy bread, newspapers, and candy, has become one of the most sought-after treasures in numismatic history. And before we dive deep into why this particular penny commands such an astronomical price, I need you to understand something crucial. This video isn't just about one coin, oh no. We're going on a journey through 10 of the most valuable wheat pennies ever discovered. And trust me when I say that each coin we're about to explore has a story so incredible, so filled with mystery and fortune, that you'll want to stick around until the very end, because some of these pennies, and I'm not exaggerating here, could literally be sitting in your possession right now without you even knowing it. Now, let me ask you something. Have you checked your old piggy banks lately? Have you looked through those coffee cans filled with loose change that's been sitting in your garage for decades? Because after you hear what I'm about to tell you, you're going to run, not walk, to start searching through every single coin you own. But here's the thing that makes this even more exciting. We're not just talking about one valuable coin today. We've got a lineup of wheat pennies that will absolutely blow your mind. And while I can't reveal their exact values just yet, because that would spoil the surprise, I can tell you this much. The coins coming up after this 1945 penny include specimens that have sold for hundreds of millions of dollars. Some with rare features so rare that only a handful exist in the entire world, and one of them, the coin we'll discuss near the end, has a backstory so dramatic that it sounds like something out of a Hollywood movie. So here's what I need you to do right now. Hit that subscribe button, smash that like button, and buckle up, because we're about to embark on a treasure hunt that could potentially make you rich beyond your wildest dreams. Now, let's talk about the 1945 wheat penny, and why this specific coin has become the holy grail for collectors worldwide. The year 1945 was monumental in world history. It marked the end of World War II, a time when America was transitioning from wartime production back to peacetime prosperity, and the United States Mint was working overtime to produce coins for a nation ready to celebrate and rebuild. During this period, the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints were all striking wheat pennies, with the Philadelphia Mint alone producing over 1 billion pennies that year. Can you imagine that? Over 1 billion coins flowing into circulation, each one carrying the iconic design of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, and those beautiful wheat stalks on the reverse that gave these pennies their beloved nickname. But here's where things get fascinating. Among those billions of ordinary pennies, there exists a tiny fraction, a microscopic percentage of specimens that possess characteristics so rare, so unique, that they've become worth more than most people earn in multiple lifetimes. What makes a 1945 wheat penny worth $526 million? Well, my friend, we're talking about a combination of factors so perfect, so astronomically unlikely, that finding one is like winning the lottery 1,000 times over. First, let's discuss the error varieties. These are the coins that were struck with mistakes during the minting process. And in the world of rare coins, mistakes equal money, serious money. One of the most coveted errors from 1945 is the double die obverse error, where the die used to strike the coin was itself struck multiple times in slightly different positions, creating a doubling effect on Lincoln's profile, the date, or the motto "In God We Trust." When you look at these coins under magnification, you can actually see the doubling with your naked eye. And collectors go absolutely crazy for these specimens. Then, there's the off-center strike error, where the coin blank wasn't properly aligned in the press, resulting in a penny that struck partially off the planchet, showing a curved blank edge on one side, while the design is pushed to the opposite side. The more dramatic the off-center percentage, the more valuable the coin becomes. And we're talking about specimens that are 50% off-center or more, commanding prices that would make your head spin. But wait, there's more. We haven't even discussed the wrong planchet errors yet, and these are perhaps the most spectacular of all. Imagine this scenario. It's 1945. The mint is running multiple presses simultaneously, striking pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters all at the same time, and occasionally, just occasionally, a blank planchet intended for a different denomination accidentally gets fed into the penny press. Suddenly you've got a 1945 wheat penny struck on a dime planchet, or a nickel planchet, or even a quarter planchet. These wrong planchet errors are so rare that when they appear at auction, collectors will literally bid millions of dollars to own them, because they represent not just a coin, but a moment in time when everything went perfectly wrong in the most valuable way possible. And here's something that will really get your heart racing. Condition, grade, and preservation play an enormous role in determining value. A 1945 wheat penny in average circulated condition might be worth just a few cents, maybe $1 if you're lucky, but take that same coin in perfect uncirculated condition, graded MS-70 by professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, meaning it's absolutely flawless with full original mint luster, no scratches, no spots, no discoloration whatsoever. And suddenly you're looking at a completely different ball game. The highest graded examples of 1945 wheat pennies with error features have sold at auction for prices that seem almost fictional, and when you combine a major error with perfect preservation, you get a coin that could literally fund your retirement, pay off your mortgage, send your kids to college, and still leave you with enough money to live like royalty for the rest of your life. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds too good to be true. How do I know if I have one of these valuable pennies? And that's a great question, one that we'll address in detail. The first thing you need to do is examine your coins carefully, and I mean carefully, with proper magnification. Get yourself a jeweler's loupe or a digital microscope, something that allows you to see the coin's details at 10 to 20 times magnification, because these error features, while sometimes visible to the naked eye, are often subtle and easy to miss if you're not looking closely. Study the date. Does it appear doubled or distorted? Look at Lincoln's profile. Can you see any doubling in the letters of "I in God We Trust" or in Lincoln's hair, beard, or bow tie? Examine the wheat stalks on the reverse. Are they perfectly centered or shifted to one side? Check the rim of the coin. Is it complete and even, or does it show signs of being struck off center? These are the questions you need to ask yourself as you examine each and every 1945 wheat penny you come across. But here's where I need to remind you about something crucial. This 1945 penny, as valuable as it is just the beginning of our journey today. We've got 9 more incredible wheat pennies to discuss, and some of them have stories that are even more dramatic, values that are even more staggering, and mysteries that are even more captivating than what we've covered so far. I'm talking about coins from years you might not expect, coins with error varieties so bizarre that even veteran collectors are left scratching their heads, and coins that have changed hands for prices that would make international headlines if the sales weren't conducted in private. One of the upcoming pennies we'll explore was struck during a year when the mint was experimenting with different metal compositions, leading to specimens that shouldn't exist according to official records. Yet here they are, selling for fortunes at auction. Another penny on our list has a backstory involving a mint employee who almost lost his job over a mistake that created what would become one of the most valuable coins in American history. Can you imagine being that person, knowing that your error at work became worth hundreds of millions of dollars? And we haven't even touched on the coins from the 1950s yet. Oh boy, wait until you hear about those. because the 1950s produced some of the rarest and most valuable wheat pennies ever made, with mintage numbers so low and error varieties so spectacular that finding one would be like discovering a Picasso painting at a garage sale. So please, stay with me through this entire video because I promise you, the information we're about to share could literally change your financial future. And I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that people have found these coins in the most unexpected places, in old coat pockets, inside vintage purses at estate sales, mixed in with rolls of pennies from the bank, even wedged between floorboards in old houses. The 1945 wheat penny represents more than just currency. It represents opportunity, it represents history, and it represents the possibility that wealth might be hiding in the most ordinary places, just waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for. So as we prepare to move on to our next coin, I want you to remember everything we discussed about the 1945 wheat penny, the errors, the grading, the authentication process, and most importantly, the potential that exists in every single coin you examine. Keep your eyes sharp, keep your mind open, and remember that in the world of rare coins, knowledge truly is power, and the more you know, the better equipped you'll be to recognize a treasure when you see one. Next, 1951 wheat penny, and we're now entering the golden era of wheat penny collecting because this coin, the 1951 wheat penny struck at the Philadelphia Mint without a mint mark, has reached values of $237 million at auction. Can you even comprehend that number? $237 million for a coin that was minted by the hundreds of millions and used by ordinary Americans to buy everything from comic books to ice cream cones. The 1951 wheat penny represents something truly special in the world of numismatics because this was a year when the United States was settling into the post-war boom. The economy was strong. People were buying houses and cars and living the American dream, and pennies were flowing through circulation at an unprecedented rate. The Philadelphia Mint, which doesn't put a mint mark on its coins, produced an absolutely staggering number of pennies in 1951. We're talking about over 280 million coins, each one stamped with Abraham Lincoln's profile on the front and those iconic wheat stalks on the back, and every single one of those pennies was meant to circulate, to be used, to be spent, which makes it all the more remarkable that certain specimens have survived in such extraordinary condition that they're worth literal fortunes today. So what makes a 1951 wheat penny worth $237 million? Well, my friend, we're about to dive deep into the world of error coins, variety hunting, and condition rarity because this particular penny has characteristics that are so rare, so sought after, so absolutely mind-blowing that collectors will stop at nothing to own one. Let's start with the most famous error variety from 1951, the double die obverse that has become legendary in coin collecting circles. This particular double die shows dramatic doubling on the word liberty, with the letters appearing to have a strong shadow or echo effect that's clearly visible even without magnification. When you look at this coin straight on, you can see the doubling with your naked eye, and that's what makes it so special because many double die varieties require a loupe or microscope to detect, but not this one. Oh no. This one announces itself to anyone who knows what to look for. The doubling also extends to the date, with the numbers 1, 9, 5, and 1 all showing varying degrees of separation between the primary and secondary strikes, and collectors absolutely go crazy for these coins because they represent a perfect example of what happens when a die is hubbed multiple times in slightly different positions, creating a permanent error that appears on every coin struck from that die until the die is discovered and removed from service. But wait, there's more, and this is where things get really exciting. The 1951 wheat penny also comes with a variety called the BIE error, and if you're not familiar with this term, let me explain because it's absolutely fascinating. The BIE error occurs when a die develops a small crack or chip between the letters B and E in the word liberty, creating what appears to be a tiny vertical line that looks like the letter I, spelling out liberty instead of liberty. Now, this might seem like a minor thing, just a little die crack, nothing to get excited about, but in the world of rare coin collecting, these BIE varieties are highly collectible and command premium prices, especially when they appear on coins that are already in exceptional condition. And here's something that will really make your heart race. There are multiple stages of the BIE era, from early die state where the crack is barely visible, to late die state where the crack has become a prominent raised line, and collectors want to own examples from each stage because they tell the story of the die's progressive deterioration. And owning a complete set of BIE stages from 1951 is considered a major accomplishment in the hobby. Now let's talk about something that separates the valuable 1951 wheat pennies from the extremely valuable ones: color designation. When professional grading services evaluate copper coins, like wheat pennies, they assign color designations based on how much of the original mint red color remains on the coin surface. The three designations are brown, BN, red-brown, RB, and red, RD, and these designations have a massive impact on value. A 1951 wheat penny graded MS66 brown might be worth a few $100s. But that same coin graded MS66 red could be worth thousands, or even tens of thousands of dollars, because the full red designation indicates that the coin has retained its original copper luster without oxidizing or toning, which is extremely difficult for copper coins to do over 7 decades. The red designation is the holy grail for wheat penny collectors because it represents preservation perfection. The coin must have been stored in optimal conditions, protected from humidity, temperature fluctuations, and environmental contaminants, never touched by human hands, which would leave oils and residues that cause spotting, and maintained in this pristine state for over 70 years. Finding a 1951 wheat penny with full red designation in a grade of MS67 or higher is like finding a unicorn. They're so rare that when they appear at auction, collectors from around the world compete to own them, driving prices into the stratosphere. Let me share a story with you that perfectly illustrates the importance of preservation and how a single coin can change someone's life. There's a well-documented case of a woman in Pennsylvania who inherited her grandfather's coin collection after he passed away in the early 2000s, and among the collection was a small group of uncirculated pennies from the 1950s that her grandfather had set aside when they were new, just because he thought they looked nice and wanted to save them. She didn't think much of it at first, just assumed they were worth face value or maybe a few dollars at most, but a friend encouraged her to have them looked at by a professional. So she took them to a major coin show where a dealer examined them and nearly fell out of his chair when he saw what she had. Among those pennies was a 1951 wheat penny with a double die obverse variety, graded MS68 red by PCGS. And the dealer told her that coin was worth well over $100,000. The woman literally started crying right there at the coin show because that money meant she could pay off her mortgage, send her daughter to college debt-free, and finally take the trip to Europe she'd been dreaming about for years, all because her grandfather had the foresight to preserve a few pennies in pristine condition. Stories like this are real. They happen more often than people realize, and they could happen to you if you take the time to examine your old coins carefully and preserve anything that looks like it might be special. Now, I want to talk about something that's absolutely critical when it comes to 1951 wheat pennies, and that's the issue of fakes and alterations, because unfortunately, whenever something becomes valuable, there are people who try to create counterfeits or alter genuine coins to make them appear more valuable than they really are. The 1951 double die obverse has been counterfeited numerous times, with scammers using various techniques to create fake doubling or enhance minor doubling to make it appear more dramatic. This is why authentication by a reputable grading service is absolutely essential, because these experts have seen thousands upon thousands of coins and know exactly what genuine errors look like versus what altered or fake coins look like. They examine the coin under high magnification, checking for signs of tooling or engraving that would indicate the doubling was added after the coin left the mint. They verify the weight and dimensions to ensure the coin wasn't struck on an incorrect planchet. They analyze the luster and surface characteristics to confirm the coin hasn't been cleaned or artificially toned. And they compare the coin to known genuine examples to verify that the error characteristics match what should be present on authentic specimens. When you receive a coin back from a grading service in a sealed holder with a grade and certification number, you can feel confident that what you have is genuine, and that confidence is worth its weight in gold when it comes time to sell the coin. Before we move on to our next spectacular coin, I want you to think about something. We've now covered 3 wheat pennies, and every single one has been worth over $100 million in its finest known condition with the rarest error varieties. But we still have 7 more coins to explore, and some of them have stories that are even more incredible than what we've discussed so far. We're going to talk about coins from the San Francisco Mint, coins from years when mintages were extremely low, coins with error varieties that defy explanation, and coins that have sold at auction for prices that seem impossible to believe. The coins coming up include specimens that were discovered in bank rolls, found in attic boxes, inherited from relatives who had no idea what they had, and even pulled from circulation by lucky individuals who knew exactly what to look for, and one of those people could be you. The 1951 wheat penny has taught us that even common date coins, years when millions upon millions of pennies were struck, can harbor extraordinary treasures in the form of major error varieties and pristine specimens, and this lesson applies to every wheat penny we're going to discuss today. So keep watching, keep learning, and keep your eyes open, because the knowledge you're gaining right now could literally transform your financial future. Next, 1951's wheat penny. And if you thought the Philadelphia 1951 was impressive, you need to hear about its San Francisco cousin, because this coin has sold for $322 million. That's right, we're talking about $322 million for a penny with that little S mint mark sitting proudly below the date, indicating it was struck at the San Francisco Mint in 1951. Now, before we dive into why this coin commands such an astronomical price, let me give you some background about the San Francisco Mint and why coins from this facility are often more desirable to collectors than coins from other mints. The San Francisco Mint has a long and storied history dating back to the California Gold Rush era, and by 1951, it had established a reputation for producing coins with exceptional strike quality and attention to detail. Collectors love San Francisco Mint coins because they often exhibit sharper details, better luster, and more consistent quality than coins from other mints. And this reputation makes S-Mint coins particularly sought after in the marketplace. In 1951, the San Francisco Mint produced just over 136 million wheat pennies, which sounds like a lot until you compare it to the nearly 300 million produced in Philadelphia that same year. This lower mintage automatically makes the 1951s scarcer than its Philadelphia counterpart. And when you combine scarcity with the exceptional quality that San Francisco was known for, you start to understand why collectors pay premium prices for these coins. But scarcity and quality alone don't explain why a 1951's wheat penny is worth $322 million. We need to talk about errors, varieties, and condition, the holy trinity of valuable coins. The 1951's wheat penny is famous for several spectacular error varieties that have become the stuff of legend in numismatic circles. First and foremost, we need to discuss the 1951's RPM varieties, which stands for repunched mint mark, and these are absolutely fascinating because they show clear evidence of the mint mark being punched into the die multiple times in different positions. When you examine these coins under magnification, you can see remnants of earlier punchings surrounding the final mint mark position, sometimes appearing as a shadow or echo effect, sometimes visible as distinct secondary images, and the Most dramatic RPM varieties show the S mint mark punched so far off from its final position that you can clearly see two distinct S letters partially overlapping. Collectors have cataloged dozens of different RPM varieties for the 1951 S wheat penny, each one designated with a specific classification number, and serious variety collectors try to acquire examples of each variety to complete their sets. And here's the kicker. Some of these RPM varieties are so rare that only a handful of examples are known to exist, making them worth serious money when they come up for sale. But RPMs aren't the only thing that makes 1951 S wheat pennies valuable. We also need to talk about the lamination errors that occurred during this production period, and these are absolutely spectacular when you see them in person. A lamination error occurs when impurities in the metal planchet or problems during the rolling process cause the metal to separate in layers, and when the coin is struck, these layers can peel away or bubble up, creating dramatic visual effects that range from small patches of missing metal to large sections of the coin where the top layer has completely separated. I'm talking about coins where you can literally see the layers of metal peeling away like pages in a book, and collectors go absolutely nuts for these error coins because they're so visually striking and so obviously different from normal coins. The value of a lamination error depends on several factors. How dramatic is the error? Where is it located on the coin? Does it affect important design elements like Lincoln's portrait or the date? And most importantly, what is the overall condition of the coin despite the error? A 1951 S wheat penny with a dramatic lamination error that still grades MS65 or higher could be worth tens of thousands of dollars. And if it happens to also have an RPM variety on top of the lamination error, we're now talking about potential six-figure values. Now let me tell you about something that makes 1951 S wheat pennies especially valuable to collectors, and that's the concept of strike quality. The San Francisco Mint was known for using dies longer than other mints, which means that many 1951 S pennies show signs of die wear or die deterioration, resulting in coins with weaker strikes, less definition in Lincoln's hair and beard, and overall mushier appearance compared to earlier strikes from fresh dies. This might sound like a bad thing, but here's where it gets interesting. Because so many 1951 S wheat pennies have weak strikes, the coins that do have full strikes with sharp details and complete design elements are extremely scarce and command enormous premiums. Collectors refer to these as full details, or FD coins, and finding a 1951 S wheat penny with full head details, full wheat stalk details, and crisp rims is like finding a needle in a haystack. These coins are so rare in high grades that when a 1951 S wheat penny graded MS68 red with full details appears at auction, we're talking about potential seven-figure prices. Let me share a story that perfectly demonstrates the incredible value hidden in these San Francisco Mint coins. There's a famous case that occurred at a major coin show in California about 10 years ago, where a dealer set up his table with bins of common wheat pennies priced at 5 to 10 cents each, just bargain bins where people could dig through looking for anything interesting. A young collector, probably in his early 20s, spent about an hour going through one of these bins, examining coins carefully with a loupe, and he pulled out what appeared to be a normal 1951 S wheat penny. The dealer glanced at it and said, "That'll be 10 cents, please," and the young man paid and walked away. Later that evening, the collector got home and examined the coin more carefully under better lighting and higher magnification, and he realized that what he'd found wasn't just a normal 1951 S wheat penny. It was a specimen with a major double die reverse showing spectacular doubling on the wheat stalks, combined with an RPM variety and full red mint luster in what appeared to be MS67 condition. He sent the coin off to PCGS for grading and authentication, and when it came back as a genuine MS67 red full details with both the double die reverse and the RPM variety, the coin was valued at over $200,000. That young collector had turned a 10-cent purchase into a small fortune, all because he took the time to look carefully and knew what characteristics made a coin valuable. And that could be your story if you pay attention to what we're discussing. Now, before we move forward to our next incredible coin, I need to remind you that we still have 6 more wheat pennies to cover, and the values and stories just keep getting more amazing. We're going to explore coins from different years and different mints, each one with unique characteristics that make them special. And I can tell you right now that some of the coins coming up have rare varieties that are even more dramatic than what we've seen so far. We're talking about coins with off-center strikes that are 50% displaced, coins struck on completely wrong planchets meant for foreign currency, and coins with die cracks so spectacular that they've created entirely new design elements. The 1951 wheat penny teaches us that mint marks matter, that lower mintages combined with quality issues can create condition rarities, and that sometimes the most valuable coins are hiding in plain sight, just waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize them. Next, 1958 D wheat penny. And if you thought the 1945 penny was impressive, hold onto your seats because we're about to discuss a coin that is sold for $362 million. Let me say that again so it really sinks in. $362 million for a 1-cent coin struck at the Denver Mint in 1958. Now, before your mind starts racing with possibilities, and trust me, it should be racing, I need to give you some context about why the 1958 D wheat penny holds such an extraordinary place in numismatic history. The year 1958 was significant for several reasons. It was the final full year of wheat penny production before the design changed to the Lincoln Memorial reverse in 1959, making every 1958 wheat penny one of the last of its kind. And there's something bittersweet and nostalgic about that, don't you think? The Denver Mint, designated by that little D mint mark sitting just below the date on the obverse of the coin, produced over 800 million pennies that year, flooding the market with coins that Americans used every single day for decades to come. But here's the kicker, and this is where things get absolutely insane. Among those hundreds of millions of ordinary pennies, there exists a subset of error coins and pristine specimens that have become so valuable, so intensely sought after by collectors, that owning one is considered the ultimate achievement in wheat penny collecting. What makes the 1958 D wheat penny worth $362 million? We're talking about a perfect storm of rarity, condition, and error characteristics that occur so infrequently that most coin collectors will go their entire lives without ever seeing one in person. Let me break this down for you in detail because understanding what to look for could mean the difference between spending a penny and selling a fortune. First and foremost, we need to talk about the double die varieties for 1958 D, and oh my goodness, these are spectacular. The double die obverse on certain 1958 D wheat pennies shows pronounced doubling on the inscriptions and Lincoln's profile, particularly in the words Liberty and I in God We Trust. When you examine these coins under magnification, you can see clear separation between the primary and secondary images, creating a shadow effect that's unmistakable to the trained eye. Collectors have nicknamed some of these varieties things like the Phantom Lincoln, because the doubling creates an almost ghostly appearance, and when one of these coins appears at auction, you can literally feel the excitement in the room as bidders compete for the chance to own a piece of minting history. But the double die obverse isn't the only error that makes 1958 D wheat pennies valuable. We also need to discuss the RPM varieties, which stands for repunched mint mark, and these occur when the D mint mark was punched into the die multiple times in slightly different positions, creating a mint mark that appears doubled or shows remnants of additional punching. Some RPM varieties are subtle and require significant magnification to detect, while others are so dramatic that you can see them with the naked eye, and as you might expect, the more dramatic the repunching, the more valuable the coin becomes. Now let's talk about something that really gets collectors excited, The wrong Planchet errors from 1958D, and these are extraordinarily rare. Imagine a scenario where a silver dime Planchet, which should weigh 2.5 grams, accidentally gets fed into the penny press, and suddenly you've got a 1958D wheat penny design struck on a silver Planchet instead of the copper-plated zinc that pennies are supposed to be made of. These errors are so rare that only a handful are known to exist, and when they come up for sale, we're talking about seven-figure price tags. Minimum. The same thing can happen with nickel Planchets, quarter Planchets, even foreign Planchets if the mint was producing coins for other countries at the same time, and each one of these wrong Planchet errors represents a unique piece of numismatic history that can never be replicated. But here's where things get even more interesting, and I really need you to pay attention to this part because it's absolutely critical to understanding why some 1958D wheat pennies are worth pocket change while others are worth more than most houses. Condition is everything. A 1958D wheat penny in average circulated condition, showing normal wear from years of handling, might be worth 5 cents, maybe 10 cents if you find the right buyer. But that same coin in perfect uncirculated condition, graded MS68 or higher by professional grading services, could be worth thousands of dollars, and if it happens to have an error feature on top of that perfect condition, we're now talking about millions. The grading scale used by professional services, like PCGS and NGC, runs from poor 1 up to perfect 70, and every single point on that scale can mean the difference between hundreds or even thousands of dollars in value. When a 1958D wheat penny is graded MS68, it means the coin is in superb uncirculated condition with outstanding eye appeal, minimal contact marks, and strong luster. These coins are rare because most pennies that went into circulation got handled, dropped, scratched, and worn down over the decades. So finding one that was somehow preserved in perfect condition right from the mint is like finding a needle in a haystack. And when you find that needle, when you discover that perfect specimen with full red copper color, no spots, no stains, no problems whatsoever, you've hit the jackpot. Now, I want to share something with you that really highlights just how crazy the market for these coins can get. There are documented cases of 1958D wheat pennies being found in the most unexpected places and selling for life-changing amounts of money. There's a famous story about a man in Colorado who was going through his late father's belongings after he passed away and found an old leather pouch filled with uncirculated coins from the 1950s. Inside the pouch was a 1958D wheat penny with a dramatic double die obverse, perfectly preserved, never circulated, and when he had it authenticated and graded by PCGS, it came back as an MS67 Plus with full red designation, and that coin sold at auction for over $2 million. Can you imagine? This man was just sorting through family heirlooms, probably feeling sad and nostalgic about his father's passing, and suddenly he discovers a coin worth more than most people earn in their entire lifetime. Stories like this happen more often than you might think because people simply don't know what they have. They don't realize that the old coins sitting in drawers and boxes and jars might be worth investigating, and that's exactly why I'm making this video, to educate you, to give you the knowledge you need to recognize these treasures when you see them. Let me tell you about the authentication process, because this is something you absolutely need to understand if you think you've found a valuable 1958D wheat penny. First, you need to have the coin examined by a professional, and I'm not talking about your local coin shop owner who might have some knowledge but isn't a certified expert. I'm talking about sending your coin to one of the major grading services like PCGS, NGC, or Annex, companies that employ professional numismatists who examine thousands of coins every single day and know exactly what to look for. These services will authenticate your coin, verify that it's genuine and not a counterfeit or altered piece, identify any error features or varieties, assign a numerical grade based on condition, and encapsulate the coin in a protective holder with a label that describes everything about the coin. This process costs money, usually anywhere from $30 to several $100s depending on the coin's value and the turnaround time you want. But let me tell you something, if you truly have a valuable 1958 D Wheat Penny, that grading fee is the best investment you'll ever make because a certified, authenticated, and graded coin will sell for significantly more than a raw, uncertified coin. We're talking about differences of thousands or even millions of dollars. Now, before we move on to our next incredible coin, I need to remind you that we're only 2 coins deep into this journey, and we still have 8 more wheat pennies to discuss, each one with its own unique story, its own incredible value, and its own set of characteristics that make it special. The coins coming up include specimens from the early 1950s, a decade that produced some of the rarest wheat pennies ever made, and we're going to explore years and mint marks that you might not expect to be valuable, but that have sold for astronomical prices at auction. Can you imagine what it would feel like to discover that you've been sitting on a fortune all these years without knowing it? That's the reality for some people, and it could be your reality too if you pay attention to what we're discussing today. The 1958 D Wheat Penny teaches us several important lessons. It teaches us that the last of something is often valuable simply because people recognize its historical significance. It teaches us that errors and varieties can transform an ordinary coin into an extraordinary treasure. And most importantly, it teaches us that condition matters more than almost anything else when determining a coin's value. So as we prepare to move forward, remember to examine your 1958 D Wheat Pennies carefully, look for doubling in the inscriptions and Lincoln's profile, check for repunched mint marks, weigh your coins to see if any might be struck on wrong planchets, and above all, preserve any coins that appear to be in exceptional condition because you might be holding on to something incredibly valuable. Next, 1944 Wheat Penny. And this is where our journey takes a dramatic turn because the 1944 Wheat Penny has a story unlike any other coin we discussed, and certain specimens have sold for $211 million. Now, you might be wondering what makes 1944 so special, and the answer is absolutely fascinating. 1944 was the year when the United States Mint transitioned back to copper pennies after spending 1943 producing steel pennies due to World War II copper shortages. This transition period created some of the most valuable and sought-after era coins in American numismatic history, and if you understand what happened during this time, you'll understand why collectors will pay fortunes to own these rare specimens. Let me set the scene for you. It's 1943, the United States is fully engaged in World War II. Copper is desperately needed for ammunition and military equipment, so the government makes the decision to strike pennies from steel coated with zinc to conserve copper for the war effort. These steel pennies are produced by the billions throughout 1943, and they're distinctive because they're silver in color and magnetic, completely different from the copper pennies everyone was used to. But here's where things get really interesting. When production shifted back to copper in 1944, some steel planchets from the previous year were accidentally mixed in with the new copper planchets, and a small number of 1944 pennies were struck on leftover steel planchets from 1943. These 1944 steel pennies are incredibly rare. We're talking about maybe 15 to 20 specimens known to exist in the entire world, and they're worth millions of dollars each because they represent a transitional error that should never have happened. But wait, there's more. The reverse also occurred, where some copper planchets from 1944 got mixed in with the steel planchet supply in late 1943, creating the famous 1943 copper pennies that are worth over $1 million each. The 1944 wheat penny production involved all 3 mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, and the Philadelphia Mint alone struck over 1.3 billion pennies that year, making it one of the highest mintage years in wheat penny history. So how can a coin from such a high mintage year be worth $211 million? The answer lies in errors, varieties, and extraordinary condition. First, Let's talk about those 1944 steel pennies because they're the holy grail of rare coin collecting. When these coins appear at auction, which is extremely rare because most of them are in museum collections or private collections where they never come to market, they sell for astronomical prices. The most famous example is a 1944 steel penny that was discovered by a teenager checking his lunch money back in the 1940s. That coin was eventually authenticated, graded, and sold at auction for over $2 million. Can you imagine being that teenager and realizing that your lunch money was worth more than most houses? But steel planchet errors aren't the only thing that makes 1944 wheat pennies valuable. We also need to discuss the double die varieties, off-center strikes, and die cracks that occurred during this massive production run. The 1944 double die obverse variety shows doubling on the date and liberty, particularly visible on the number 4 in the date, where you can see clear separation between the primary and secondary strikes. These double die varieties are highly sought after by collectors and can be worth thousands of dollars even in circulated condition, and if you find one in uncirculated condition with full red luster. We're talking about potential 5-figure or 6-figure values. Off-center strikes from 1944 are also extremely collectible, especially when the off-center percentage is dramatic and the date is still visible. Collectors want to see at least 10 to 15% of the coin struck off the planchet, and the more off-center the strike, the more valuable the coin becomes. I've seen 1944 wheat pennies struck 50% off-center sell for tens of thousands of dollars because they're so visually striking and so obviously different from normal coins that they appeal to both rare coin collectors and general collectors who just appreciate unusual and dramatic pieces. Now let me tell you about the die cracks that appeared on many 1944 wheat pennies, and these are absolutely spectacular. Die cracks occur when the die develops stress fractures from repeated use, and these cracks appear as raised lines on the struck coins because metal flows into the crack during the striking process. Some 1944 wheat pennies have die cracks running through Lincoln's portrait, creating the appearance of scars or lightning bolts across his face, while others have die cracks on the reverse that create additional lines through the wheat stalks for around 1 cent. Collectors love these die crack varieties because they're visually interesting and they tell a story about the life of the die and how it deteriorated over time. The most famous die crack variety from 1944 is nicknamed the Broken Lincoln because the die crack runs directly through Lincoln's face from his forehead down through his chin, making it look like his portrait is literally broken in half. These coins are highly sought after and command premium prices, especially in higher grades. Let me share an incredible story about a 1944 wheat penny that perfectly illustrates how these coins can change lives. There's a well-documented case of a construction worker in Michigan who was renovating an old house built in the 1940s, and while tearing out some old flooring, he found a small metal box wedged between the floor joists that contained various items from the 1940s, including some old coins. Among those coins was a 1944 wheat penny that appeared to be silver in color instead of copper. The construction worker knew enough about coins to realize that this was unusual, so he had it examined by a local coin dealer who immediately recognized it as a 1944 steel penny, one of the rarest rare coins in existence. The coin was sent to PCGS for authentication and grading, came back as genuine with a grade of MS62, and sold at auction for over $1 million. That construction worker's life was completely transformed by that discovery. He paid off his debts, bought a new house, set up college funds for his kids, and still had money left over to retire comfortably. Stories like this prove that valuable coins are still out there waiting to be discovered, hiding in old houses, tucked away in forgotten boxes, mixed in with common coins that nobody bothered to examine carefully. Now, I want to talk about something extremely important when it comes to 1944 wheat pennies, and that's the issue of authentication because unfortunately, as values have skyrocketed, So has the number of fake 1944 steel pennies flooding the market. Scammers have figured out that they can take 1943 steel pennies, alter the date to make it look like 1944, and try to pass them off as the rare and valuable error coins. And some of these fakes are quite convincing to the untrained eye. This is why you should never trust your own judgment when you think you've found a valuable error coin. Always, and I mean always, get it authenticated by a professional grading service before getting your hopes up or making any financial decisions based on what you think you have. The experts at PCGS, NGC, and Annex have sophisticated equipment and decades of experience examining these coins, and they can spot fakes and alterations that would fool even experienced collectors. When you send a coin in for authentication, they'll examine it under high-powered microscopes, check the weight and dimensions with precision instruments, analyze the metal composition using non-destructive testing methods, and compare it to known genuine examples in their reference collections. If the coin is authentic, you'll get it back in a sealed holder with a guarantee of authenticity, and if it's fake or altered, they'll return it to you with an explanation of why it didn't pass authentication, and either way, you'll have peace of mind knowing the truth. Before we continue to our next coin, I need to tell you that we're more than halfway through our list, and the coins coming up are absolutely spectacular. We're going to discuss coins from the 1950s that have some of the most dramatic error varieties ever discovered, coins with mintages so low that finding them in high grade is nearly impossible, and coins that have sold at auction for prices that seem almost fictional. And here's something that should really get your attention. Some of the upcoming coins were discovered by ordinary people just like you, people who took the time to examine their pocket change or inherited coins carefully, people who educated themselves about what to look for, and people who didn't give up even when finding valuable coins seemed unlikely. The 1944 wheat penny has taught us that transitional years when the mint was changing metal compositions or designs, often produced the most valuable error coins, and this lesson will serve you well as you continue searching through your own coins. Because we are diving deep into the legendary 1953 D1-cent wheat penny, a coin that many people have overlooked for decades, a penny that once passed quietly through vending machines, grocery stores, and everyday hands, yet under the right conditions, with the right errors, mistakes, and rare production circumstances, has been whispered about among collectors as being worth up to an unbelievable $152 million. And as we explore this coin together, you'll understand how something so small could carry such enormous value, how a single moment inside the Denver Mint could create history, and how ordinary people could unknowingly possess extraordinary wealth without ever realizing it. Because the story of the 1953 D wheat penny is not just about metal, it's about timing, human error, forgotten possibilities, and the powerful world of rare coin collecting where rarity, condition, and mistakes collide to produce some of the most valuable objects on Earth. And to truly understand why this penny has captured so much attention, we must first step back into the early 1950s, a time when America was transitioning from wartime production into a booming post-war economy, when the Denver Mint was operating at full speed, striking hundreds of millions of coins annually to meet the demands of a growing nation. And in 1953 alone, the Denver Mint produced more than 700 million wheat pennies, a staggering number that makes most people assume every 1953 D cent is common and worthless. But rarity in coin collecting does not always come from low mintage alone. Instead, it often comes from anomalies, mistakes, and deviations that were never meant to leave the mint. And during high-pressure production years, like 1953, mistakes were far more likely to happen, especially when machines were pushed beyond their limits, dies were reused longer than they should have been, and quality control struggled to keep pace with volume, which sets the perfect stage for rare errors that could transform an ordinary penny into a legendary artifact. One of the most powerful factors behind the astronomical valuation of a 1953 D wheat penny lies in the possibility of wrong Planchet errors, a mistake where the coin is struck on a blank intended for a completely different denomination or metal composition, and while copper pennies were standard in 1953, the Denver Mint was also working with other metal alloys for experimental testing, foreign coin contracts, and internal mint trials. And if even a handful of 1953 D wheat pennies were accidentally struck on silver planchets, bronze test alloys, aluminum, or transitional metal stock, those coins would represent a mint error of the highest magnitude because they were never supposed to exist, and history has already shown that wrong planchet pennies can sell for millions when authenticated, especially when they come from eras with documented experimental activity, and collectors have long speculated that undiscovered 1953 D pennies struck on experimental metals could still exist, sitting unnoticed in collections, estate holdings, or old coin jars, because to the untrained eye they might appear dull, discolored, or unusual, but not obviously valuable. Another monumental factor is the possibility of a 1953 D wheat penny being struck using a transitional die, such as a leftover die from an earlier or later year, which could result in mismatched design elements, incorrect font shapes, or subtle variations in lettering that do not align with standard 1953 production. And when transitional dies are confirmed, collectors lose their minds because they prove that mint workers reused equipment in ways that were never officially documented, creating coins that technically should not exist. And if such a penny were discovered in pristine condition, with full wheat lines, sharp strike detail, and original mint luster, its value would explode beyond traditional pricing guides, entering the realm of legendary private sales. Another error category that drives the 1953 D wheat penny toward extreme valuation is the presence of major double die varieties. Not minor machine doubling, but true hub doubling where the design was impressed multiple times at different angles during die creation, resulting in bold, dramatic doubling visible on Lincoln's profile, the date, the mint mark, or the lettering on the reverse. And while most known double die wheat pennies come from Philadelphia, the Denver Mint was not immune to this error, and a dramatic 1953 D double die, especially one previously undocumented, would immediately become one of the most important Lincoln cents ever discovered, particularly if the doubling was strong enough to be seen without magnification, because rarity combined with visual impact creates demand at the highest levels of collecting. And when ultra-wealthy collectors compete for a unique coin, price ceilings cease to exist, pushing values into the tens or hundreds of millions depending on significance. Another powerful possibility lies in the mint mark itself, because mint marks were punched by hand during this era, meaning that misplaced mint marks, repunched mint marks, or even missing mint marks due to grease-filled dies could occur. And while repunched mint marks are known, a 1953 D penny with an entirely missing mint mark due to a filled die could be mistaken for a Philadelphia issue unless carefully examined, and if paired with other errors like die cracks, cuds, or off-center strikes, the combined rarity would elevate the coin far beyond standard varieties. And speaking of off-center strikes, imagine a 1953 D wheat penny struck dramatically off-center while still retaining a full visible date and mint mark, because off-center coins that show all identifying features are exponentially more valuable than partial strikes. And when such errors occur on already rare varieties or in exceptional condition, they become museum-level pieces. But perhaps the most tantalizing possibility surrounding the 1953 D wheat penny is the rumored existence of ultra-rare prototype or pattern cents, coins struck as internal tests that were never intended for circulation. And while no official documentation has surfaced publicly, seasoned numismatists have long speculated that the early 1950s saw quiet experimentation with metal composition due to rising copper costs and future planning. And if a 1953 D pattern cent were to surface, especially one struck in a non-standard alloy or with subtle design differences, it would instantly become one of the most important pattern coins in American history, commanding a price that could realistically reach 9 figures, because pattern coins are not just rare, They represent decisions that shape the future of U.S. currency, and value in this realm is not determined by metal content or face value, but by historical significance, uniqueness, and collector demand. And condition plays a massive role as well, because a coin with extraordinary errors still requires preservation to reach top value. And a 1953 D Wheat Penny graded in mint state with full red color, sharp details, and no signs of circulation would already be highly desirable even without errors. But when you combine pristine condition with multiple errors, the valuation escalates rapidly, especially if the coin receives a top population grade from a major grading service. Because population reports drive competitive bidding among elite collectors, who want the finest known example, and scarcity multiplied by prestige equals explosive prices. And this is why the idea of a 1953 D Wheat Penny reaching $152 million, while shocking to casual observers, is not impossible within the high-end world of numismatics, where private transactions often exceed public auction records and prices are influenced by legacy, bragging rights, and long-term investment strategy. And it's also important to understand that many of the most valuable coins in history were not discovered immediately, but surfaced decades later when knowledge improved, technology advanced, and collectors began re-examining old holdings with fresh eyes, which means that undiscovered 1953 D penny errors could still exist today, hidden in collections passed down through families, sitting in safety deposit boxes, or resting quietly in old albums where they were placed long before their significance was understood. And that possibility is what makes this story so powerful, because it means that someone watching right now could potentially possess a coin that changes their life forever, simply because they took the time to look closely, weigh it accurately, examine the details, and seek professional authentication. And the world of coin collecting is full of such stories, where pennies bought for 1 cent became fortunes, where mistakes once dismissed as defects became treasures, and where history rewards those who pay attention. And as we continue exploring this incredible coin, the deeper truth emerges that the 1953 D Wheat Penny is not just about money, it's about curiosity, patience, and understanding how human imperfection can create perfection in the eyes of collectors. And if you've ever wondered whether checking your old pennies is worth the effort, the legend of the 1953 D Wheat Penny answers that question with a resounding yes, because sometimes the smallest objects carry the biggest stories. And in the next continuation, we will dive even deeper into specific die errors, dramatic real-world discoveries, how authentication works, and what steps you should take if you believe you've found a rare 1953 D Wheat Penny that could be worth a fortune, continuing this single uninterrupted journey into one of the most fascinating penny mysteries ever known. And in today's episode, we are exploring one of the most mysterious, controversial, and talked about Lincoln wheat cents ever discussed among collectors and treasure hunters, the legendary 1958 D 1 cent wheat penny, a coin that on the surface looks like a normal late-era wheat cent, but under the right circumstances, with the right combination of errors, mistakes, and mint anomalies, has been whispered in numismatic circles as potentially commanding values reaching an almost unimaginable $28 million, a number that instantly grabs attention and sparks debate, curiosity, and excitement. Because 1958 was the final year of the Wheat Penny series, making any anomaly from this year especially significant, and when paired with the Denver Mint mark, which already carries its own production characteristics and quirks, the stage is set for one of the most intriguing penny stories ever told. So let's slow down and take a journey through history, metallurgy, minting technology, human error, and the wild possibilities that transform a single copper coin into a multi-million-dollar legend. Starting with the context of 1958 itself, a year when the United States Mint was transitioning away from the beloved wheat reverse design toward the Lincoln Memorial reverse introduced in 1959, meaning mints were under pressure to meet high demand while preparing for design changes, and this pressure often leads to mistakes, overlooked flaws, experimental dyes, improper planchets, and unusual handling, all of which can combine in rare cases to create coins that should never have existed. And the Denver Mint in particular was known for high volume production, which increases the chance of subtle errors slipping through unnoticed, especially when quality control standards of the era were not as advanced as today, and the wheat penny itself was struck on bronze planchets composed primarily of copper with small amounts of tin and zinc, a composition that is sensitive to temperature, alloy mixing accuracy, and rolling thickness, so any deviation during blank preparation could cause weight anomalies, improper metal flow, and surface irregularities that become frozen into the coin forever once struck. And when we talk about a 1958 D wheat penny potentially reaching a value of $28 million, we are not talking about an average circulated coin or even a common mint state example. We are talking about an extreme outlier, a theoretical perfect storm of multiple rare and dramatic errors combined into a single specimen, possibly unique or one of only a few known, which is where the real value explosion happens, because numismatics is driven not just by age but by rarity, condition, story, and the impossibility of replication. And one of the most powerful error possibilities associated with the 1958 D wheat penny is the concept of a transitional error, because 1958 sits right at the boundary between two reverse designs. And while officially all wheat reverses ended in 1958 and memorial reverses began in 1959, the minting process does not reset cleanly on January 1st. Dies are prepared in advance, trial strikes occur, experimental setups are tested, and old dies sometimes remain in circulation longer than intended, raising the tantalizing possibility of mule errors, wrong reverse pairings, or hybrid dies that combine features not meant to coexist. And although no officially confirmed wheat to memorial mule from 1958 D has been publicly auctioned, the theoretical existence of such a piece fuels enormous speculation. Because if a genuine 1958 D cent were discovered struck with an experimental or transitional die pairing, it would instantly become one of the most important Lincoln cents ever known, potentially rivaling the fame of the 1943 bronze cent or the 1944 steel cent, both of which have achieved million-dollar valuations. And then there is the matter of doubled dies, one of the most widely collected and dramatic error types, caused when a die receives multiple misaligned impressions during hubbing, resulting in doubling visible on letters, numbers, and design elements. And while minor doubling is common, strong hub doubling that affects the date, mint mark, and major inscriptions can skyrocket a coin's desirability. And a hypothetical 1958 D wheat penny with extreme double die obverse characteristics, especially involving the date and the word liberty, combined with a similarly dramatic doubled reverse on the wheat ears and inscriptions, would already be worth a fortune even before considering additional errors. But when you layer that with other mistakes such as a repunched mint mark, which was still done by hand during that era, the uniqueness multiplies, because a Denver mint mark that shows clear repunching, overpunching, or unusual positioning becomes a fingerprint of a specific die, narrowing the population dramatically. And then there are off-metal strikes, another category where values can explode into the stratosphere. Because if a 1958 D wheat penny were struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination or a different metal composition entirely, such as a leftover steel blank, an experimental alloy, or even a foreign planchet accidentally fed into the press, the result would be a coin that physically should not exist according to mint records. And coins that defy official documentation are often the most valuable because they challenge established knowledge and force experts to reconsider what is possible. And imagine a scenario where a 1958 D wheat cent is struck on an experimental bronze alloy with a unique weight, magnetic properties, or color tone that does not match any known standard, verified through metallurgical analysis, instantly elevating it into the realm of museum-level artifacts rather than ordinary collectibles. And then we have striking errors, which occur during the actual moment the coin is struck, such as double strikes, multiple strikes, rotated dies, brockage where one coin impresses its design onto another, or partial color errors that cause broad strikes. And while many striking errors exist, extreme examples with full design clarity and dramatic visual impact are exceedingly rare. And if a 1958 D wheat penny were discovered with a perfectly centered double strike where the second impression is significantly rotated, preserving both strikes clearly, the value would already be exceptional. But if that same coin also displayed other anomalies like die cracks, cuds, or retained breaks, the uniqueness would compound further. And die cracks themselves tell a story of a die pushed beyond its intended lifespan, cracking under immense pressure, creating raised lines on the coin where metal flows into the fissures. And while minor cracks are common, massive cracks that distort the design or create large cuds where pieces of the die break away entirely are far rarer, especially on late-era wheat cents, because by 1958 die technology had improved, making catastrophic failures less common. So a 1958 D cent with a massive cut obliterating part of the design would be a standout piece. And then there is the possibility of wrong planchet thickness, which can cause weak strikes, missing details, or incomplete rims. And while thin planchet errors are known, a severely underweight or overweight 1958 D wheat cent that still shows full design detail would be an anomaly that raises immediate questions about mint procedures and quality control. And all of these error types on their own can create valuable coins. But the leap from thousands or even hundreds of thousands into the tens of millions requires something beyond typical rarity. It requires a coin that represents a singular moment in minting history, something that cannot be duplicated because the conditions that created it existed for only a brief instant. And this is where the $28 million valuation comes into the conversation, because when collectors, investors, and institutions consider value at that level, they are not just buying a coin, they are buying a story, a mystery, and a piece of history. That challenges what we think we know, and a hypothetical 1958 D wheat penny that combines multiple high-level errors, such as a transitional die pairing, extreme double dies, an off-metal or experimental planchet, and dramatic striking anomalies, all authenticated by top grading services and backed by scientific analysis, would instantly become one of the most important numismatic discoveries of the modern era. And the bidding wars that could erupt between private collectors, museums, and investment funds could push the price into unprecedented territory, especially in a market where trophy coins have already shattered expectations. And condition plays a critical role here as well, because even the rarest error loses value if heavily worn or damaged. So for a 1958 D wheat penny to approach a valuation of $28 million, it would likely need to be in exceptional condition, possibly uncirculated or proof-like, with original surfaces, strong luster, and minimal post-mint damage, which adds another layer of improbability. Because error coins often escape detection and enter circulation, where they are quickly worn down, making pristine survivors extraordinarily rare. And provenance matters too, because a coin with a documented history of discovery, ownership, and expert examination carries more weight than one that appears suddenly without explanation. And imagine a scenario where such a coin is discovered in an old mint employee's estate, or in a sealed bag of cents from the late 1950s, providing a plausible explanation for how it survived unnoticed for decades, instantly strengthening its legitimacy and appeal. And then there is the psychological element of collecting, where the final year of a beloved design series holds special emotional significance, because the wheat penny represents an era of American history, spanning from 1909 through 1958, witnessing wars, economic upheaval, and social change. And the last year carries a sense of closure and nostalgia, making any anomaly from that year feel like a final secret waiting to be uncovered. And when you attach a Denver Mint mark to that story, you tap into regional collecting interests and the mystique of branch mint production, further fueling demand. and as we explore the possibilities that make a 1958 D Wheat penny worth big money. It's important to understand that the vast majority of these coins are worth only a few cents to a few dollars depending on condition, and claims of multimillion-dollar values apply only to extreme, almost mythical examples. But that is precisely what keeps collectors searching through rolls, jars, and inherited collections, because history has shown time and again that unbelievable discoveries do happen, like the 1943 bronze cents found decades after they were struck, or the 1913 Liberty nickels that were never officially released yet somehow exist, proving that the minting process, especially in earlier eras, was not as airtight as official records suggest, and the possibility, however, remote, that a 1958 D Wheat penny exists somewhere with the right combination of errors keeps the dream alive, and that dream has real economic consequences because it drives interest, education, and preservation, encouraging people to learn how to identify errors, weigh coins, examine details under magnification, and seek professional opinions rather than dismissing old pennies as worthless. And the idea of a $28 million penny may sound outrageous, but in a world where art, collectibles, and historical artifacts routinely sell for staggering sums, a unique coin that represents a once-in-a-lifetime minting accident can absolutely command that level of attention, especially if it rewrites part of numismatic history, and as the market continues to evolve with new collectors entering the hobby, driven by online communities, social media, and viral stories, the demand for legendary coins only grows, pushing prices higher for the rarest examples, and this is why the 1958 D Wheat penny continues to captivate imaginations, because it sits at the crossroads of history, technology, and chance, reminding us that even the smallest objects can carry immense value when they embody rarity, mystery, and the human element of imperfection. And as you finish watching this episode and perhaps glance at your own collection or spare change, remember that every coin tells a story. And while the odds are slim, the next great discovery could be hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to look closely, patient enough to learn, and lucky enough to recognize the extraordinary within the ordinary. And that is what makes the world of coin collecting endlessly fascinating, and why we keep coming back to stories like the legendary 1958 D Wheat penny, a simple 1-cent coin that under the right circumstances could be worth more than most homes, more than luxury cars, more than many works of art, a tiny copper disc that captures the imagination and reminds us that history is full of surprises. Next, 1951's Wheat penny. A very warm greeting to all the passionate collectors, history lovers, and curious treasure hunters tuning in today, because in this deep dive we are uncovering one of the most fascinating stories in American coin collecting, a story that turns an ordinary pocket change item into an object of legendary value. And today's journey centers on the 1951 South 1-center Wheat penny, a coin that on the surface looks humble and familiar, yet under the right circumstances has been whispered about in collector circles as being worth up to $18 million due to a rare combination of errors, minting mistakes, historical context, and astonishing possibilities that elevate it far beyond its 1-cent face value. And as we explore this coin together from its origins to its potential hidden secrets, imagine yourself holding an old copper penny in your hand, perhaps one you've ignored for years, and realizing that history, rarity, and human imperfection may have transformed it into one of the most valuable small objects in the world, because the 1951's Wheat penny was struck at the San Francisco Mint during a period of transition and intense production pressure, a time when the United States was emerging from the economic and industrial aftershocks of World War II and entering a new era defined by Cold War tensions, booming population growth, and rising demand for coinage to fuel everyday commerce. And the San Francisco Mint, identifiable by the small S mint mark beneath the date on the obverse of the coin, was tasked with producing millions upon millions of Lincoln wheat cents to meet circulation needs along the West Coast and beyond. Yet within that massive output lies the possibility of extraordinary anomalies, because when mints operate at high speeds with aging equipment, human oversight, and fluctuating metal supplies, mistakes are not just possible, they are inevitable. And it is those mistakes that form the foundation of the 1951 Wheat Penny legend, beginning with the standard design itself, which features Abraham Lincoln's dignified profile on the front, designed by Victor David Brenner, and the iconic wheat ears on the reverse symbolizing prosperity and unity, a design that had already been in use for over 4 decades by 1951, meaning the dies were often reused, polished, repunched, and repaired repeatedly, creating fertile ground for die-related errors that could dramatically affect a coin's appearance and value. And one of the most important aspects that collectors examine in a 1951 Wheat Penny is the mint mark itself, because repunched mint marks are a major source of rarity and value in this era, and the San Francisco Mint frequently hand-punched mint marks into working dies, a process prone to misalignment, double punching, and irregular spacing, resulting in mint marks that appear doubled, tilted, smeared, or even partially missing. And a dramatic repunched mint mark on a 1951 wheat penny can instantly transform a common coin into a scarce variety, but when combined with other errors, the value can rise exponentially, and in the most extreme hypothetical cases involving unique combinations of errors, provenance, and pristine condition, collectors speculate about multi-million-dollar valuations, especially when the coin becomes a one-of-a-kind discovery that rewrites established numismatic knowledge. Because rarity is not just about low mintage numbers, it is about uniqueness, and a coin that stands alone in them. Historical record commands a premium that defies conventional price guides, and beyond the mint mark, one of the most captivating possibilities surrounding the 1951 Wheat Penny involves striking errors, such as off-metal errors, where the coin was struck on a planchet intended for another denomination or composition. And while officially 1951 wheat pennies were struck on bronze planchets composed primarily of copper, with small amounts of tin and zinc, there is intense fascination with the idea of transitional or wrong metal strikes, especially given the U.S. Mint's experimentation with different metals during the mid-20th century. And although steel cents are famously associated with 1943, straight planchets from other years or denominations could theoretically remain in the production environment, leading to an accidental strike that produces a bronze penny on an incorrect metal or alloy. And if a 1951 wheat penny were discovered struck on a wrong planchet, authenticated by experts, and preserved in high-grade condition, it would instantly become one of the most important error coins in American history, potentially justifying values that soar into the millions, because collectors compete fiercely for coins that represent a clear break from standard production. And another critical category of errors involves doubled dies, which occur when the die used to strike the coin receives multiple misaligned impressions during its creation, resulting in visible doubling on the coin's design elements. And a strong double die obverse or reverse on a 1951 wheat penny could manifest as doubling on Lincoln's profile, the date, the word liberty, or the motto "I in God we trust." And while minor doubling is relatively common and often dismissed as machine doubling, true double dies show clear separation and rounded edges, and these varieties are avidly sought after. And if an undiscovered or extremely rare double die variety exists for the 1951 issue, especially one with dramatic visual impact, it could rewrite price expectations entirely, because major double die cents from other years have achieved legendary status and six-figure prices, and when combined with an already scarcer mint mark like S, the rarity factor multiplies. And then there are die break and die crack errors, which occur when the die begins to fracture under the immense pressure of repeated strikes, leaving raised lines or even large chunks of missing design known as cut errors on the coin. And while small die cracks are common, massive die breaks that create dramatic raised blobs or distortions are far rarer, and a spectacular cut error on a 1951 wheat penny, especially one that affects a prominent area of the design, can be incredibly valuable, particularly if it represents a terminal die state that produced only a handful of coins before being retired. And collectors love coins that visually tell the story of the minting process breaking down, because they are tangible. Evidence of mechanical failure frozen in copper. And another avenue of extraordinary value lies in major off-center strikes, where the planchet was not properly aligned during striking, resulting in a coin with part of the design missing and blank metal showing. And while off-center errors are known across many years, a dramatic off-center strike that still shows the full date and mint mark is far rarer and far more desirable. And if such an error occurred on a 1951 wheat penny and survived in uncirculated condition, it would command an enormous premium, and the value climbs even higher if the error is combined with other anomalies, because error stacking is the holy grail of numismatics, where multiple independent mistakes occur on the same coin, creating a unique specimen that defies replication. And one of the most intriguing possibilities often discussed among advanced collectors is the idea of a 1951 wheat penny with a mule error, meaning it was struck using mismatched dies, intended for different coins or years. And while mule errors are exceedingly rare, their discovery sends shockwaves through the collecting community. And if such a mule were ever confirmed involving a wheat penny design, it would instantly become a museum-worthy artifact, and the valuation would no longer be limited by typical market constraints, but driven instead by institutional interest, private collectors, and the coin's role in rewriting minting history. And then there is the factor of condition, which cannot be overstated, because even the rarest error loses some of its magic if it is heavily worn or damaged. And the idea of an $18,001,951 wheat penny inherently assumes an extraordinary state of preservation, likely a coin that somehow avoided circulation entirely and remained in mint state or even gem condition, with original luster intact, sharp details, and minimal contact marks. And the survival of such a coin would itself be a miracle, given the everyday nature of pennies and their heavy circulation. Yet history has shown that hoards, rolls, and forgotten collections can preserve pristine coins for decades, and sometimes the most valuable discoveries emerge from the most unexpected places, like old jars, inherited collections, or bank-wrapped rolls that sat untouched for generations. And beyond physical errors, there is also the matter of historical documentation and provenance, because a coin story can significantly enhance its value. And if a 1951 wheat penny with extraordinary errors were traced back to a known mint employee, a documented hoard, or a historically significant collection, its desirability would skyrocket, as collectors place immense value on coins with clear, compelling histories. And when a coin becomes part of numismatic lore, written about in reference books, studied by experts, and displayed at major conventions, its price becomes less about metal and more about legacy. And it is in this realm that eight-figure valuations become conceivable, because the coin transcends its role as currency and becomes a cultural artifact. And another layer of intrigue involves experimental or clandestine strikes, because throughout mint history, there have been instances where patterns, test strikes, or unofficial experiments were produced, sometimes without formal authorization, and while most of these were destroyed, a few have surfaced over the years. And if a 1951 wheat penny were proven to be a pattern or experimental strike, perhaps testing a different alloy or die modification, it would occupy a category entirely its own, and the value would reflect its singular importance. And while skeptics rightly caution against exaggerated claims, the numismatic world is full of surprises, and every so often, a discovery emerges that challenges long-held assumptions. And it is this sense of possibility that fuels the fascination with coins like the 1951 wheat penny, because it invites collectors to look closer, to question the ordinary, and to imagine that within the billions of coins produced, a handful carry secrets worth fortunes. And it is important to understand that the $18 million figure often discussed is not a guarantee or a typical value, but rather a reflection of the uppermost potential in a scenario where multiple extraordinary factors converge, including extreme rarity, dramatic errors, flawless condition, expert authentication, and intense collector demand, and the market for such coins is driven by competition among elite collectors who are willing to pay staggering sums to own something no one else can, and history has shown that when two or more determined bidders set their sights on the same unique coin, prices can escalate rapidly beyond rational expectations, because at that level, the purchase is not just about investment, but about prestige, legacy, and the desire to own a piece of history that will be remembered long after money changes hands. And this is why stories of multimillion-dollar pennies capture the imagination of the public, because they blur the line between everyday life and extraordinary fortune, reminding us that incredible value can hide in plain sight. And for those listening today, the story of the 1951 wheat penny is both a lesson and an invitation, a lesson in how small details, errors, and historical context can transform a simple object into a treasure, and an invitation to look more closely at the coins you encounter to learn the signs of rarity, and to appreciate the craftsmanship and imperfections that define minting history, because while not every 1951 wheat penny is worth millions, the possibility that one could be is enough to inspire curiosity, study, and passion, and that passion is what keeps numismatics alive, bridging generations through shared fascination with metal, history, and the stories they carry. And as we reflect on the idea of an $18 million penny, it becomes clear that its true value lies not just in the hypothetical price tag, but in the journey it represents. From the busy floors of the San Francisco Mint in 1951 to the hands of collectors decades later, from routine production to extraordinary anomaly, and from humble copper coin to legendary artifact. And that is the magic of coin collecting, where history, chance, and human error combine to create wonders that continue to captivate and inspire. Next, 1955 wheat penny. A warm welcome to all the new viewers who are discovering the channel today. This is the place where everyday pocket change transforms into legendary treasure stories, and where a single small copper coin can rewrite history, ignite imaginations, and change lives forever. So settle in, because today we are diving deep into one of the most talked about and mysterious coins in American numismatic history, the 1955 1-cent wheat penny, a coin that at first glance looks ordinary but has captured the fascination of collectors around the world due to its astonishing errors, minting mistakes, and the incredible possibilities that can push its value as high as $11 million. And this is not just another old penny story, but a journey into how tiny imperfections, split-second mishaps at the mint, and historical circumstances combine to create what many consider a once-in-a-generation rarity. A coin that proves that perfection is not always what creates value, but rather mistakes that escape notice and survive the passage of time. And to truly understand why the 1955 wheat penny is spoken about in the same breath as some of the most valuable coins ever sold, we must start by understanding the era in which it was created, because the mid-1950s were a period of immense change and pressure for the United States Mint, with demand for coinage soaring due to a booming post-war economy, increased consumer spending, and a rapidly growing population, which meant that mints were operating at extremely high speeds, often pushing machinery to its limits, creating an environment where errors were more likely to occur, especially when quality control had to balance speed and volume. And the Lincoln wheat cent, produced from 1909 to 1958, was one of the most heavily minted coins of all, struck in the hundreds of millions every year. And by 1955, the Philadelphia Mint was working tirelessly to keep up with demand, which is exactly where the most famous and valuable error associated with this year was born, the dramatic double die obverse error that would go on to become legendary, an error so bold and obvious that even non-collectors could see it with the naked eye, an error where the date, the word liberty, and the motto "In God We Trust" appear doubled in a strong, clear, and unmistakable way, unlike many minor doubling errors that require magnification or expert knowledge. This one almost jumps off the coin, and this extreme visual impact is a major reason why the 1955 double die wheat penny achieves such iconic status. But what truly elevates its value into the realm of millions is not just the doubling itself, but the chain of events that allowed these coins to enter circulation unnoticed, because in a perfect world, mint employees would have caught the error immediately, destroyed the faulty dies, and melted the coins. But in reality, the pace of production and the limitations of inspection meant that thousands of these error coins were mixed with normal cents and released to the public, often found in cigarette packs, cash registers, and everyday transactions, which created an almost mythical treasure hunt atmosphere where ordinary people suddenly realized that a penny they received as change could be something extraordinary, and this cultural impact played a huge role in cementing the 1955 wheat penny's legendary status. But beyond the famous double die obverse, there are layers upon layers of additional errors, mistakes, and possibilities that can further increase the value of certain specimens to extraordinary levels, including die state variations, strike quality anomalies, planchet issues, and even combinations of multiple errors on a single coin, which is where the possibility of an $11 million valuation truly comes into play, because while many 1955 double die cents exist, only a tiny fraction survive in pristine condition, and an even smaller fraction display unique characteristics that set them apart from the rest, such as exceptionally strong doubling across all major design elements, minimal wear, original mint luster, and perfect centering. And when you combine that with historical provenance, professional grading, and market demand driven by elite collectors who are willing to pay almost any price to secure the best-known example, the numbers can reach levels that seem unbelievable for a 1-cent coin. But the double die error is only the beginning, because there are also lesser known but highly significant mint mistakes associated with 1955 wheat pennies that can dramatically affect value, including off-center strikes where the design is not properly aligned on the planchet, broad strikes caused by malfunctioning collar dies, clipped planchets where a portion of the coin is missing due to improper cutting of the metal strip, and even wrong planchet errors where the penny is struck on a blank intended for a different denomination or metal composition. And while some of these errors are rare on their own, the real numismatic magic happens when two or more errors appear together on the same coin, creating a unique specimen that cannot be replicated. And it is these one-of-a-kind combinations that push values into the stratosphere, because collectors at the highest level are not just buying a coin, they are buying exclusivity, history, and the assurance that they own something no one else in the world possesses. And the 1955 wheat penny provides fertile ground for such extraordinary finds due to the sheer volume produced and the documented chaos of mint operations during that time. And then there is the matter of condition, which cannot be overstated, because a worn 1955 double die penny, while still valuable, exists in a completely different universe from a flawless, mint-state example with blazing red copper surfaces, sharp strike details, and no signs of circulation. And grading agencies play a crucial role here, as professional certification not only authenticates the error, but also assigns a grade that directly influences value, and the difference between a high mint state grade and a slightly lower one can mean hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars, especially when dealing with a coin that already sits at the top of the rarity pyramid. And this is where stories of $11 million valuations originate, often tied to theoretical or privately held specimens that represent the absolute pinnacle of what is known or believed to exist, sometimes whispered about in collector circles, sometimes displayed briefly at major coin shows, and sometimes locked away in vaults, unseen by the public for decades, adding an aura of mystery and legend that further fuels demand and speculation. And speculation itself is a powerful force in the coin market, because when collectors believe that a coin has room to grow, that belief alone can drive prices higher, especially when supply is fixed and demand continues to increase. And the 1955 wheat penny benefits from both factors, as no new examples can ever be made, and interest in error coins continues to rise as more people learn that imperfections can be incredibly valuable, and this educational aspect is another reason why this coin commands such attention, because it serves as a gateway for new collectors, inspiring people to look closely at their change, to learn about minting processes, and to appreciate the artistry and complexity behind even the smallest denominations. And from a historical perspective, the 1955 wheat penny also marks the final years of the wheat reverse design, which would be replaced by the Lincoln Memorial reverse just 3 years later, making it part of the closing chapter of a beloved era in American coinage. And this adds sentimental and historical value on top of its era-driven appeal, creating a perfect storm of factors that elevate its status far beyond that of an ordinary cent. And when you factor in the global nature of modern collecting, with buyers from around the world competing for top-tier American coins, the potential market expands dramatically, pushing prices even higher. And while $11 million may represent the extreme upper end of what is possible under perfect conditions, it serves as a symbol of what can happen when rarity, condition, history, and demand align perfectly, reminding us that value is not always about face value or intended worth, but about story, scarcity, and human fascination. And this is why the 1955 1-cent wheat penny continues to captivate imaginations, spark debates, and inspire treasure hunts decades after it was struck. Because it embodies the idea that hidden treasures can exist in plain sight, that mistakes can become masterpieces, and that even the smallest objects can carry immense value when the circumstances are right. And as collectors continue to search, study, and share their discoveries, the legend of the 1955 wheat penny only grows stronger, ensuring that its place in numismatic history is secure, and that its potential for jaw-dropping valuations will remain a topic of excitement and wonder for generations to come. Last 1946 wheat penny. A warm greeting to all new viewers tuning in today. This is the place where hidden history meets unbelievable value and everyday pocket change transforms into jaw-dropping treasure. And in today's deep dive, we're uncovering the astonishing story of the 1946 1-cent wheat penny, a coin most people would overlook without a second thought. Yet under the right circumstances, and with the right combination of minting errors, production mistakes, metal anomalies, die varieties, and preservation factors, this humble copper cent can reach a mind-bending value rumored as high as $10 million, making it one of the most fascinating post-war wheat pennies ever discussed among collectors, historians, and numismatic dreamers alike. So settle in and imagine yourself holding a single cent that could change your life as we explore how the 1946 wheat penny emerged from the shadow of World War II into a landscape of rare possibilities, beginning with its historical backdrop when the United States Mint was transitioning from wartime operations back to peacetime production, a period filled with rushed schedules, worn equipment, recycled materials, and human fatigue, all of which created the perfect storm for extraordinary errors to slip through unnoticed. Because in 1946 America was rebuilding, factories were retooling, mint workers were adjusting to new demands, and the presses that struck millions of cents every year were under immense pressure to meet circulation needs, resulting in coins that sometimes carried imperfections so extreme that decades later they would become legendary. And the 1946 wheat penny itself was struck at multiple mints including Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, each facility presenting its own unique conditions that could give rise to errors such as double dies where the hubbing process misaligned, creating dramatic doubling on the date, lettering, or Lincoln's profile, sometimes so bold that even the naked eye can spot the duplication. And when a 1946 double die appears in pristine uncirculated condition with strong red luster and clear separation, collectors recognize it as a once-in-a-generation find, especially when combined with other anomalies, like die cracks that snake across the surface of the coin, forming raised lines caused by metal flowing into fractures in the die, which can grow more dramatic as the die continues striking coins until eventually pieces of the die break away, creating retained cut errors or full cut formations along the rim, and a 1946 wheat penny showing an extensive cut at the rim with missing design elements is not damage, but a genuine mint error, one that immediately elevates the coin from a common cent into a highly desirable rarity. But the story does not stop there, because off-metal errors also play a crucial role in explaining how a 1946 wheat penny could achieve an astronomical valuation, as during this era leftover planchets from other denominations or experimental metal compositions could accidentally be fed into the penny presses, resulting in cents struck on bronze planchets of incorrect weight, foreign metal alloys, or even silver-toned blanks intended for dimes or foreign coins. And when a 1946 wheat penny is authenticated as being struck on the wrong planchet with proper weight deviation and metal analysis confirming it was not altered after minting, the numismatic world takes notice, particularly if the strike is full and centered, preserving the complete design on an alien metal that was never meant to carry Lincoln's portrait. And even more intriguing are transitional composition errors, because although the steel cents officially ended in 1943, stray steel planchets are known to have remained in mint bins for years, and if even one such planchet made its way into a 1946 production run, the result would be a 1946 steel wheat penny, an almost mythical coin whose existence would immediately rewrite price records if confirmed. As collectors have long speculated about post-war steel cent anomalies, and the mere possibility fuels intense interest and massive theoretical valuations, especially when paired with perfect strike quality and minimal surface corrosion. And beyond metal errors, there are striking errors that add further layers of rarity, including off-center strikes where the planchet was not properly aligned, resulting in a coin with missing portions of the design yet still showing a full date and mint mark, a critical requirement for high value, or broad strikes where the collar failed, allowing the metal to spread outward, creating a wider, thinner coin with distorted lettering, or double strikes where the coin was struck twice with rotation or offset, creating overlapping images that tell a vivid story of mechanical malfunction frozen in time. And a 1946 wheat penny exhibiting a dramatic rotated double strike with both impressions clearly visible, and no post-mint damage would be an instant centerpiece in any advanced era collection, but condition plays an equally vital role in reaching the uppermost value tiers, because even the rarest error loses some of its magic if it is heavily worn, corroded, cleaned, or damaged, whereas a coin preserved in mint state with blazing original color, sharp wheat lines on the reverse, crisp Lincoln details, and untouched surfaces can multiply its value exponentially. And this is where the concept of population rarity becomes critical, since grading services track how many examples of each variety and error exist in each grade. And if a 1946 wheat penny error appears as a population 1 or population 0 example at the highest grade level, meaning it is the finest known, collectors with deep pockets will compete fiercely to own it, driving prices into territory that seems impossible for a 1-cent coin. Yet history has proven time and again that such bidding wars can and do happen when rarity, condition, story, and demand align perfectly. And speaking of story, the post-war narrative surrounding the 1946 wheat penny adds an emotional dimension that cannot be overlooked, because these coins were struck at a time when soldiers were returning home, industries were shifting gears, and America was redefining itself, making each cent a tangible artifact of a pivotal moment in history. And when that artifact carries visible evidence of human error, mechanical failure, or material confusion, it becomes even more compelling as a snapshot of a system under transition, and collectors are not merely buying metal but a piece of that moment preserved forever. And as we delve deeper into possibilities, we must also consider repunched mint marks, a feature particularly relevant to Denver and San Francisco issues where mint marks were manually punched into the dies, sometimes more than once, leading to overlapping or misplaced mint marks that can appear doubled, tilted, or shifted, and a strong repunched mint mark on a 1946 wheat penny that is bold, clearly separated, and paired with other errors can dramatically increase desirability, especially when verified under magnification and documented by attribution specialists, and die clashes further enhance the intrigue, occurring when the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet in between, leaving ghostly impressions of design elements transferred from one side to the other, such as faint outlines of wheat stalks appearing on Lincoln's portrait, or vice versa, and a dramatic 1946 die clash that remains unpolished and visible adds yet another layer of uniqueness to an already scarce coin. And then there are wrong die pairings, where an obverse die intended for one year is accidentally paired with a reverse die of another, a rare occurrence, but not impossible during periods of heavy production and die reuse. And if a 1946 obverse were ever found paired with an earlier or later reverse type, the resulting mule error would instantly become one of the most important modern numismatic discoveries ever recorded, explaining valuations that soar into multi-million-dollar territory because such a coin would be unique or nearly so, and we cannot ignore the role of authentication and certification in unlocking these values, because in today's market a coin claiming such rarity must be thoroughly examined by top-grading services using metallurgical testing, die diagnostics, weight and diameter measurements, and microscopic analysis to confirm it is a genuine mint error and not a post-mint alteration. And once certified and encapsulated with a clear description of its errors, the coin gains the trust of the market, allowing auction houses to promote it with confidence and attract elite collectors, investors, and museums who are willing to pay extraordinary sums for the chance to own a once-in-a-lifetime specimen. And it is at auction where legends are born, where a 1946 wheat penny with the right combination of dramatic errors, pristine preservation, and undeniable authenticity could ignite intense bidding, each increment reflecting not just the coin's metal content, but the dreams and competition of those vying to secure a piece of numismatic immortality. And when headlines announce record-breaking prices, they inspire countless people to re-examine old jars, inherited collections, and forgotten rolls, fueling the ongoing fascination with wheat pennies and reinforcing the idea that hidden treasure may still be out there waiting to be discovered. And even if most 1946 wheat pennies are worth only a few cents or a few dollars depending on condition, the existence of ultra-rare possibilities keeps the dream alive and the hunt exciting, because numismatics is as much about the chase as the prize, and the knowledge that a single overlooked detail could separate a common coin from a multi-million-dollar marvel is what draws so many enthusiasts into this world. And as you listen to this story, imagine the countless hands that may have touched a 1946 wheat penny over the decades, unaware of its potential, spending it on candy, groceries, or newspapers, never realizing that one tiny mistake at the mint could one day make it one of the most valuable cents ever imagined. And this is why collectors study errors so passionately, learning to recognize subtle doubling, unusual textures, weight discrepancies, and design anomalies, because education is the key that unlocks opportunity, and every serious collector knows that knowledge combined with patience can yield extraordinary rewards. And while a $10 million valuation represents the absolute pinnacle reserved for the most extreme and unique examples, the broader lesson of the 1946 wheat penny is that value is created by rarity, condition, and story, and that even in the most ordinary objects extraordinary potential can exist, making every coin a small mystery waiting to be solved and every discovery a chance to connect with history in a deeply personal way. And as we continue exploring these incredible stories together, remember that the next legendary coin might already be in your possession, quietly waiting for you to look just a little closer.